Awesome. Thanks, Ayumi, for recording. Let me go ahead and share my screen really quickly. And I press present. Why does this say spring? It's supposed to say fall. Sorry. There you go. So let me present the screen. Okay, awesome. So, hi everyone. My name is Mary Conjuro. I am a medical student at the UC Berkeley UCSF Joint Medical Program. I'm also one of the founding members for the White Coats for Black Lives at the UC Berkeley UCSF Joint Medical Program chapter. And before I introduce myself, I just want to also introduce the rest of the founding team. So this on my left in the photo is Camila Hurtado, the one on on your left, my right, that's Camila Hurtado. And then I have Aminta Kuyate, Fatuma Rinderknecht, and then Haruna Aritomi. And that's the founding members. We also have our our second year medical student team, Ria Desai, Justin Lopez, Jessica Hawkins, Kate Radcliffe, and Jessica Clover, who will be taking on our role as the founding team actually goes on to work at UCSF. And of course, you may have gotten a lot of emails already from our amazing fellows. So these are amazing fellows, and without them, we really wouldn't have been able to do anything that we are doing now. So shout out to I think two who are here, Ayumi and Samhar. So thank you all for your work. Okay. Ayumi, do you want to say anything about the poll that you want them to fill out eventually, like after yeah, go for it.
Thank you. So at the end of Maricon's presentation, we're going to launch a poll, and we'd really appreciate everyone filled that out. It just lets us gauge how helpful this seminar was and just like for demographics. So I'll announce again towards the end when it's launched.
Yay, thanks, Ayumi. Great. So I don't know, like since I introduced myself, if you guys want to introduce yourself in the chat too, that'd be great. Just like who you are, where you're from, what year you are. I think that would be fun to get to know who's joining. So yeah, again, my name is Mary Conjiro. I go by she, hers. I'm in my third year of my MD/MS program, and I was born in the Philippines, but was raised in the Bay Area, specifically Union City, and went to Cal for undergrad, graduated in 2018, worked for a year before going into medical school. So I see some people saying hi in the chat. Hi, Yumi. Hi, Sehan. Nice. Wow, all the way from Minnesota. That's awesome. Awesome to see Cal alum and someone in Cal State, Dominguez. Awesome. Great. So feel free to keep saying hi in the chat, but I wanted to say hi to the first ones who said hi in the chat. Okay, so a little bit about White Coat for Black Lives goals. Not only is it like a national organization that works to really address structural racism that is rampant within medicine, and that comes in many ways, having a lot of advocacy gatherings, etc. For our chapter, we have a strong mentorship program where we really aim to strengthen the pathway connections across the lengthy pre-medical preparation and medical school application timeline for students who are underrepresented in medicine. And so one way we do that is by having a bunch of events. And this is one of a series of events that we have hosted throughout the last 2 years. There's going to be one more event coming up, and Yumi, if you can put that in the chat, or what the next event is. I don't think we have a certain date yet, but if you know like the name of the event, feel free to put in the chat. Okay, and so if you haven't yet, please feel free to follow us. This is our Twitter and Instagram social media handles. This is also our website where we post different opportunities, and this is our email. If you have any direct questions, free to email us. Awesome. So I see a few more people saying hi from SFSU and UCLA, again, University of Minnesota is awesome. Okay, great. So today's workshop is really focused on personal statements for medical school applications. And again, this is me, but I've already done that. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the personal statement section and how to really develop that personal statement. And then we're going to also talk about a little bit about the activities section that is found within the AMCAS application, which is the application that you'll be using to apply to medical school around the nation. Okay. And so here is our medical school timeline. This is actually a little bit older. So it says here that applications start in June, but I think with recent applications, I think they've been starting in like late May where you will actually apply. So this is a really complicated timeline. And so we are right here in November, right? So it's a little late if you haven't applied if you haven't turned in your applications already. It might be a bit late for this application season, but it's actually a good time to start now if you're thinking of applying next year to think about your personal statement. And so we're here, and that's where it'll be a few months until the application is due. So before we talk about some tips and tricks, here's just like a quick preview of the prompt of AMCAS. And so here is what it was for 2020. And it says to use the space provided to explain why you want to go to medical school. The available space for your response is 5,300 characters, or approximately one full page. And so really, this is pretty much the entire prompt. And then they also have these leading questions of why have you selected the field of medicine? What motivates you to learn more about medicine? What do you want medical schools to know about you that hasn't been disclosed in other sections of the application? And other things that you may include in the personal statement is what are the unique hardships, challenges, or obstacles that may have influenced your educational pursuits, as well as comments on significant fluctuations in your academic record that are not explained anywhere else in your application. And so the whole gist of it is really why medicine, right? And so the purpose of a personal statement is really to look at your application beyond the numbers. So who are you? What makes you special? What unique perspective do you have in terms of medicine, in terms of life? What has been your life experience? Other things that are the purpose of it is to know what has motivated you in your life, and also to see how you can communicate and articulate your thoughts through writing. And so this is actually really good because I think, especially with the pandemic, a lot of schools have been trying to move away from, at least in the California UC systems, they've been trying to be a lot more holistic. In addition to the MCAT scores and GPA scores, is your distance traveled, your life experience, your leadership potential, as well as talking about something that really motivates you, whether it's research experience, a service that you've done / volunteerism, and clinically or medically related experiences. So timing. With a personal statement to medical school, it would be best to have your personal statement ready to go by late May and early June. And to work your way up to the personal statement, if you want it to be ready by then, you would have had to work on it at least a few months beforehand, right? You want to be able to write multiple drafts. Some career center guides at UC Berkeley have suggested that 8 to 10 drafts are what's recommended as a multiple drafts. For me, I think I went through 4 or 5 iterations of my personal statement, and I felt like that was fine. But it really depends on the person, right? And so, whatever will make you feel comfortable in um, your personal statement, where you feel proud of the narrative that you were able to tell about your journey, um, that is what is good for you. So again, work backwards to build in time to write multiple drafts, seek external feedback, and send to letter writers when requested and appropriate. So this last one is really important too. So maybe you would even want your personal statement to be done even earlier, because with the medical school application, you want, um, in addition to everything else in your packet, um, letter of recommendations from your letter writers. And so some of them would want your personal statement or at least a rough draft. And so you'd want them to know that you'd want to recruit your letter writers ahead of time. And so you would have to have at least some idea of your personal statement, maybe 6 months, maybe even a year beforehand. So that's something to note also. Um, and yes, and so this one says, can complement experience section also submitted with your primary application. And so we'll talk more about that when we talk to activities. And then as a little side note, which we're not talking about in this in this in this presentation, is we're not going to talk about secondary applications. And so I think a future event will talk something about this, but your personal statement can also help you with writing your secondary applications, which are specific writings for specific schools. Okay, so approaches to writing your personal statement. Some things that you can do now is you can brainstorm, you can start journaling, you can have some prompt exercises. So I think in the next slide, I actually have some questions that you can like start to think about and like just free write and answer it. You can also read a few examples. So some of the founding members actually shared their personal statement with us. And so we get to read through them together. And lastly, really, some things sometimes it's just really hard to even get the pen on the paper and to start writing. So when in doubt, just start writing. So brainstorming, reading examples, and lastly, just start writing. Okay, so here are just some questions that you can ask yourself now to like really just get your brain flowing of even starting to like write your personal statement. So you can, I think after this, we're going to send out the slides anyway. So you can read these questions and then pick 1 or 2 of these questions and just free write for 2 minutes, just sit down and then just write. And I feel like, have that in a journal or have that like paper hidden away somewhere where you can get it later when you want to start writing your personal statement. And so, and when you're able to answer this, like when you get to the interview stage, that can also help you because a lot of these are asked in interviews. So like, how have you overcome obstacles? What are your strengths, etc. So yeah, so how do you know that you want to be a physician? Why medicine and not another health career, etc., etc. Okay, so some suggestions from my colleagues and also the Career Center at Berkeley is really to focus on a narrative and to tell a story. And, not any story, tell your story. So a lot of things that people say is show, don't tell. Well, show, don't tell unless you're telling a story. And when you're telling the story, you're showing it by like descriptions of like different things that you're doing rather than just listing out a CV, right? You want it to kind of stand out because an admissions member may read 40 to 50 personal statements in a day. Other things here, it says engage in reflection, meaning bring in your insights and your thoughts on a situation as well as feelings that you have. Um, because I feel like those make it very interesting. Give specific examples and be descriptive in order to paint a picture. Use every word wisely, and try not to use any redundancies unless you're doing it for effect, smooth transitions, and then revise. So yeah, again, Career Center at UC Berkeley says that 8 to 10 drafts is average, but like I said, I only had like 4 to 5. And then proofread. This may be, just because an admissions officer may read 40 to 50 in a day, maybe one mistake in your writing can um, easily get you off the pile, and you don't want that. Okay, some suggested don'ts, or, to think about, so don't list your resume and accomplishments. Instead, focus on 1 to 2 themes and experiences. Share your reflections and not lists of duties. Remember that you have other spaces that you will be able to share information. So if it feels like you're not able to share everything that you have ever done on your personal statement, it's because you can't. But you will have the opportunity in your secondaries, in your activities / experience sections, etc. Don't try to be dramatic to stand out. Again, when you do that, it may come off as disingenuous. And if that personal statement does end up taking you to the interview, but you can't talk about anything in your personal statement because it was dramatized, then that's not good either. Uh, so talk at length. So don't talk at length about other people. Instead, you should actually talk a lot about you. So you can have maybe like the story of your parent or like relative that maybe have impacted you to pursue medicine, but then you need to be able to get that story really quickly to go back to you and how that relates to why you are going to medical school. Because you're the one who wants to get into medicine, not your parents or your relatives. So, don't be silly or like not take it seriously. So that's kind of a hard sentence, right? But like, just try to take the paper writing, um, yeah, seriously. And then these ones here were more suggested by the UC Berkeley Career Center. So they said don't tackle controversial subjects, don't idolize or attack the profession, and don't dwell on the negative. I think that there are ways to do it, which we're going to be talking about in the next few slides. Especially, you know, um, there may be something that you are against that you've seen personally with the medical system and you want to talk about it. I think that, you sharing your experiences and like what that made you think and what that made you feel, and how maybe you would want to be able to change that by being in medicine to do advocacy work. Like I feel like that is actually okay. But maybe the controversial subjects, um, yeah, I feel like, yes, you will have access to these slides after the meeting. And so I feel like these last three bullet points, I think there is space to talk about things that you would want to change, but rather than just fully attacking the profession, not saying like, oh, I hate doctors, blah, 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 blah. Or instead you could be like, there are some things that I would like to change as a doctor, and here's why I want to do it, and why I want to be in the profession. And like, it's what's motivating me to be a part of advocacy work, right? I feel like that's different than just saying the profession is bad or like saying the profession is like perfect, because nothing's really perfect. Okay. All right. So other things, Don't try to get advice from too many people or be someone you aren't. Try to write in your own language, find and keep your voice. And really, they have found that simple writing can be the strongest. Don't underestimate the importance of a well-written personal statement. Um, I think with many of you may know people from like your undergrad who, well, at least for me, I knew someone from my undergrad who she was worried that she may not have had like the best grades, but she really poured like her heart and soul into the personal statement and got into the undergraduate school that she really wanted, a UC school. Um, Luckily, medical school is kind of moving in that direction. And so a well-written personal statement can really, open doors for you rather than a very generic one. So, take the personal statement seriously. And also, while we want you to take it seriously, do have fun with it because this is your opportunity to be able to show what you want to show to schools and control how the schools view you. So ultimately, are you an interesting candidate that schools want to bring in for an interview? Okay. So these are other things. Let me just read them really quickly. Yeah, why medicine tells a story. Again, show anecdotes. And this one here, it is important to not only address why you are pursuing a career in medicine, but what you plan on doing with your MD. So why is an MD exactly what you need in order to accomplish these larger goals and dreams? Like, why can't you get it from a different profession? And this is another really good point. It is important to illustrate that the MD is not the dream, but rather a means to accomplish larger and more impactful dreams, right? Because an MD ultimately is just a degree, and that degree is what can hopefully get you to do the things that you want to do for your communities, for your patient population that you want to serve, and for yourself. So I'm just doing a lot of repetition here. Keep the language simple, use regular grammar. It's not necessary to repeat information in other parts of the application, but you can. And again, this essay is the one that will be sent to all the schools that you're applying to. Okay, so, okay, and we already said that they don't want a list of your activities. So then one thing that we wanted to talk about is if you want to include a difficult life event in your personal statement, we suggest to make sure, first of all, that you're okay um, talking about what you write in your application, because when you get to the interview and interviewers read your personal statement beforehand, they can ask you about it. So make sure that you're okay talking about it. And if maybe at the point, if it's a story you want to tell, but you know that you may have a difficult time talking about it, then just prepare yourself that interviewers can ask you anything that you write in your application. With that, you can also focus on you and how the events impacted you. A strengths-based mindset helps. And what does that mean? You can ask these questions. What did you learn from those events? So what you can do is like explain the event, and then you can show what you learned from the event, the skills that you gained, and if it impacted your grades, it's a good time to give context to your grades and what you learned to improve them. So your studying skills, collaborative learning, etc. And also you can include the events and how it impacted your decision to be a physician, if relevant. So here's like an example of an introduction. Okay, sorry, my internet's being difficult. Okay, so this is a lot of text, so feel free to take your time reading it. And again, I'm going to be sharing these slides. But this is an introduction shared by one of my colleagues about their experience with the health system and how they felt and how that made them want to become a physician, right? And so in the beginning, she talks about how she was scared and when she had severe abdominal pain and asked for pain medicines. And then, quote, she said, I was left feeling when they didn't give her when they questioned her request to get medicine, she said, I was left feeling that my character was falsely judged and that my identity as a young Black woman was now associated with a different pain that would dissuade me from seeking healthcare in the future. As a medical chart abstractor at the San Francisco Department of Public Health, I've seen this story repeated all too often. Looking back, I was fortunate that I found my voice and resilience to remain in care and be my own advocate. It is my goal to be a physician scientist, um, et cetera, et cetera. And so some of the things that I wanted to highlight that I felt was really good in this introduction is she painted the story, made us sit where she was in that ER room. Then she brought us into what she was thinking and feeling when this all took place, right? She said, I was left feeling blah. Um, I also really liked that she then talked about, she kind of dropped like a really big, amazing thing that she did, which is a medical chart abstractor, right? And related it to the story that she's seen this story repeated all too often. So I think that was really good. And then it says here, looking back, I was fortunate that I found my voice and resilience to remain in care and be my own advocate. So, as she was reflecting back. And then lastly, tied it in with what she hopes to do as a physician. Yes, and so this is a primary person. This is a personal statement that she used for her primary application. Okay, so here's another one that one of my colleagues used. So they said, so they addressed receiving a bad grade. And so let's read the underlined words. Feel free to read everything else, but I'm going to read the underlined words. I have been successful despite the challenges I faced through college as an underrepresented, underprepared student. And then talks about how they were one of the few Latinas. And then she said, to overcome these challenges, I had to develop a variety of strategies in academic discipline, time management, and collaboration with others. And then talks about other things that she has done to address the bad grades that she did get. So I really liked this strengths-based approach, said that I have been successful, despite the challenges, explained what like the social context and like just the context in general, why she wasn't able to succeed as much as she wanted to. And then acknowledged that it happened and then talked about what she did to overcome them, right? So I thought this was a really good. She talked about what like the soft skills. Then she talked about like other skills that she gained outside to be able to serve the community she wanted to, and then ended up talking about her master's degree. I saw that a lot of y'all in the chat say that you were in your post-bac, and so that's something that you can also talk about afterwards. Okay, and so here's an example of a concluding paragraph. And so as with everything, every writing maybe class that you've had, right? There's like an introduction, your body paragraphs, and then your concluding paragraphs. Let's read this one together, the whole thing. As a doctor, I aim to actively connect individuals to a healthier lifestyle by addressing both immediate and long-term issues and improving the healthcare system from within. My dual degree in molecular and cell biology, social welfare has equipped me with a holistic mindset about health, and my broad array of experiences has enabled me to contribute to the improvements of others' well-being to the best of my ability and keep capacity thus far. However, it is not enough to simply put a band-aid over an injury. I want to integrate my education and experiences with a medical degree so that I can become a compassionate physician capable of addressing the microscopic details of ailments and understanding and understanding their relation to societal factors. And as a physician, I aim to build meaningful connections with patients both within and beyond the US to better understand their narratives and to help improve their health trajectory. And so, what I liked about this concluding sentence, I haven't been able to read the rest of the paragraph, but I bet she or he talked about like their how they were able to have a micro focused degree as well as a more social human context degree, how that married together and how that can help them be a good physician because they're seeing health through different lenses. Um, they also talked about what they wanted to do as a physician, and they probably shared a bunch of different examples of um, how she or he could be a compassionate physician, and so was able to use that word compassionate in the end to just sum it all up. Um, and so this is an example of the concluding paragraph. Okay, so as with all of this, like all of these examples, I'm gonna go back to this, but all of these examples, um, you know, that took for them a long time to write them, right? Like this sounds like really good now, but I bet like actually I have talked to them and they have shared that it has taken them such a long time to write it. And so really the process and the whole thing, it can feel slow, but it's really important. So really take that time, like lean into that reflection because it's really needed. Okay, so the last few things that I wanted to talk about, other than the personal statement, are like just a quick intro to like the activities section, because like I said, you'd like, oh, I want to say everything on the personal statement, but like, um, but I can't. Where can I add it? Well, you can add it in certain sections on your AMCAS application. And so one section on the AMCAS application is the disadvantage section. And so here you will have the opportunity to indicate whether or not you identify yourself as disadvantaged. And so on AMCAS, you'll be able to read their definition of disadvantaged. And so if you feel that you have had to overcome adversity due to economic, racial, ethnic, religious, gender, learning disability, immigrant, etc., issues in your life, you could consider checking this box. And when you do, you'll be provided an opportunity to explain why you're considering yourself disadvantaged. And so for me, I talked already a lot about my immigrant experience in my personal statement and how that made me, uh, that informed me of the population that I really want to serve as a physician. And I wasn't able to get into the details of how I grew up low income and how we had to send money back to the Philippines like all the time. And maybe like, like how I had to work growing up, right? And so I was able to write about that and talk about how being first generation has impacted me and like my abilities to, um, you know, overcome like my abilities to get to where I am now to show the life that I have lived. And so I use the disadvantage section, and I know a lot of my other colleagues have also. Okay, great. So cool. So with this slide, it's saying, how is the personal statement different from activities? Like we said, you can weave your activities into your personal statement if they are relevant and crucial in your decision to applying to medical school. Just make sure to explain why and how they affected your choice to attend medical school. Because again, with a personal statement, you're really answering why medicine. And then for the activities, you can kind of focus more on like, of course, things that show that you explored medical school and like medicine as a field, but also the other things that you've done, such as maybe being a play or like being a choir. And so the last 20 minutes, I'm just going to do like a quick 10-15 minutes. I'm going to do a quick overview of like the activities section and share some examples. And so here's what it is. It's 15 entries max for activities, works, hobbies, awards, publications, which gives you 700 characters. And then for each of those 15, you can identify 3 of the most meaningful experiences, and that will give you an extra 1,325 characters to explain it. For each of them, you want to know your start and end date, the total hours, the organization name, as well as someone who can verify that you have done those meaningful experiences. And so you don't have to fill in everything. Quality is way better than quantity. Um, so here are just some examples. Um, uh, Here's an example of someone who was a student researcher and how they explained it. They said that they were a student researcher for Dr. Madsden. So when you explain your research, you want to name the PI or the principal investigator, and then talk about the things that you did. So organizing, conducting, transcribing, and coding interviews, and then what you learned from it. So I learned um, about diabetes and the social determinants of health, etc., etc. Okay, so for this one, talks about a shadowing experience. You talk about um, uh, uh, since you may not have enough space to say, like, to have one box dedicated for each shadowing experience, you can put them all in one box. And so here, this person said that they have accumulated 270 hours physician shadowing or clinical observation at various hospitals and clinics and various shadowing experiences, and then just named each of the doctors. So they talked about their doctor in family medicine, internal medicine, pediatrics, anesthesiology, pathology, and infectious disease. And then this one is an example of someone who talked about their clubs and what they did in each of the years, right? And so here they said that, they were a part of the Biology Scholars Program, the Chicanos, Hispanics, and Native Americans in science, and the Chicanos, Latinos in health education. If you didn't want to put like a specific entry for all of those clubs, then you can put them all together if they have a specific theme. And the theme here is that they are minority-centered clubs. She talked, he talked about like how it helped them, as well as what they hope to do for that program in the future. Okay, great. Okay, and then as the last example here, this is an example of a meaningful activity entry. And so, like we said, you get to choose 3 meaningful activities out of the 15, if you choose to have 15, and you will get around 2,000 words to talk about it, right? And so it's kind of like an extra like paragraph that you can talk about um, a meaningful event slash activity. And so this one was teaching a decal course. They situated like when they did it, what they did, um, and what they were able to do, and then talked about why it meant a lot to them, right? So they said that students struggled with rigorous classes, and so for them to be able to give back to other people, help them may become a stronger individual and help them, and also talked about what they were able to do with that. And so they were able to create the supportive environment that they wanted as a younger undergraduate. Okay, and so that was the activity section. And so last thing, we've talked about feedback pretty much throughout this whole thing, but really feedback is really important. Remember that the application itself does not have a spell checker. So really it's important to spell check. Personal statements cannot be changed once they're submitted. So it's important to really just read through it and just feel comfortable so that you can feel confident in submitting it. And, you know, I would hate it if you all like looked at your personal statement after you've submitted it and saw a mistake and you can't edit it. And, that's not good on your mental health to worry about that. So what you can do now, identify 2 to 3 trusted people to provide your edits, maybe people who know you well, and also people that are your mentors and letter writers. Um, People who know you well can give you feedback on things that you may have missed. And mentors and letter writers can also hopefully, build you up, and maybe help you talk yourself up more. Because with a personal statement, it's not the time to be humble. It's in here, keep track of your versions, have a date and have the initials of the editor, and then keep updated personal versions as needed. So at that, I end you with this quote: just keep editing. Just keep editing, editing, editing. Cool. Thank you all. So I'm gonna stop share and take any questions.
I had one earlier sent in the chat. I'm gonna launch the poll real quick so y'all fill it out by the end of today or the end of the meeting. But someone DM'd me and said that, let's see. Okay, yeah. So they are applying for a summer program and they were wondering if this workshop could be helpful with improving their internship slash summer program essay. So do you have any specific tips for those personal statements?
Yeah, definitely. I think so. Again, you're gonna have all these slides, right? So I would say definitely these slides here where it says, um, you know, like do tell a story, use every word wisely, revise, paint a picture. I feel like those are all things that you can do not only in like medical school application, but really any application in general. The only thing that maybe can really help you differently, these are also questions that you can ask yourself. Make sure you are answering the prompt of your application for your summer internship, right? Because then like here, the question for the AMCAS is, why do you want to go to medical school? And then so I'm sure with your with your summer program, you'll have a specific question that you need to have answered. So make sure you answer that question. And I think that'd be a good start.
Thank you. And then Alma asked, would you suggest doing the activities section first slash prep before the personal statement so you can write what you did not get to add in activities? Should I repeat that? I don't know if that's confusing.
I think I get it. So the question was like, what do you suggest first, doing the activities versus doing the personal statement? Um, what did I do? I would say, I would say, well, so what I did in my application is that on my personal statement, I still talked about, you know, some of the activities from my activities section. I think that the way I approached it was pretty good. So what I did was I wrote, I tried to have an idea of what I want on my personal statement. And at the same time, I was filling out, my activity section. And whatever I wasn't able to touch upon in my personal statement, I moved some of that to like my most meaningful like portion of my activities section. And so like that's one way you can do it. I say because I think every part of the application is important, but with the personal statement, um, you may have a story flow that you want, and um, I would go with that and then have the activity section work around it. Yeah. So that's my suggestion. But, you know, you can ask other people for their advice as well.
Thank you. And if anyone has any other questions, feel free to unmute or send them in the chat.
I have a question.
Yes.
You mentioned multiple drafts and multiple edits. From what I've been doing, I've been drafting my personal statement and I do it on Google Docs. And I know it has like a history of like your edits and stuff. Would you recommend actually having multiple drafts? That way you can actually look back at like the different edits you looked at, or is it okay to just have like essentially one draft and then multiple edits for that one draft?
Hmm. I know that there were some times when I have deleted like a paragraph because I thought I didn't need it. And then later on, I was like, wait, I actually really want that paragraph. And so I feel like that might be kind of annoying to have to, go to the save changes and then look for the version history. And so I think maybe once you get to like a good place with like your your personal statement, to just make a copy of that and then have that be like something that you can date it, and then send out the one that you want people to edit on, just so you have, just so you have like a history of all the writings that you have. So personally, so yeah, I think that would be a good idea.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And then in the chat, someone said, if for the activity session, if you have done various things for an organization, for example, research, volunteer, advocacy, etc., would you recommend talking about the responsibilities separately or all together?
Hmm.
And I'm thinking maybe like they were marketing, for example, marketing for different organizations with that.
Yeah. Well, I think if you think it warrants, like if you think if you think, let's see, if you have done various things for an organization, would you recommend talking about it? It depends on like if it's meaning, like if you feel like you can speak enough about it if you put it in different like boxes. Like I feel like I would say then go for it. I definitely did that for like one of the things I did. So I was a researcher for an organization, but I also was a fellow for it. And so I talked about the two different things separately because I felt like I did so much, like I did hella things for like both like aspects. So then I was like, okay, well then I'm gonna like separate them. Yeah. So, but then there was one where I was like, in one organization like called the Filipino Association for Health Careers, and I just kind of lumped all together like what I did for it, like um, all in one paragraph, and then I made it, I think, into like my most meaningful, so I can talk about it a little bit more. Yeah, good questions.
Should I read? Okay, so if you're telling a story about an impactful event, what can you do to prevent it from coming across as too dramatic?
Ooh, that's a good question. Not too dramatic. Hmm. I wish I had one of my like friends here to like answer that question. I feel like that's really good. If you're telling a story about an impactful event, what can you do to prevent it from coming across as too dramatic? I think I think for me at least, I know when I'm maybe trying to be like dramatic because I'm like using really big words that I don't usually use. Like I like focus too much on like details rather than just like really trying to tell the story. And so uh maybe that's something that you could reflect on yourself. I'm like, oh, what are ways that like when I tell a story it's very like dramatic. um and if an impactful event really was like, you know really life changing and really, um for a lack of better word, like dramatic in like a good or a bad way, then you can't help it but like just explain the story of how it is, right? Like if the story itself is dramatic, then like that's uh you can't change that story. But like maybe like if you're just talking about getting a cut on a finger, but then you make it into something like so big, like I feel like that's, you know, like maybe that's like not the way to go about explaining like, oh, when the blood gushed from my fingers, except like the cut was like really small, you know? So I think it depends on like the story. Um, the story and maybe using a lot of big words and maybe using like really long words. I don't know. That's like the first few things that come to my head.
Thank you. So Nicole said, is it bad to write about your desire to go into a specific specialty? What if you have had like unique backstory or personal experiences as to why? They've heard some mixed things about that.
Oh yeah, that's good. Um, so for me, that's actually a really good question for me because like a field that I really want to get into is ophthalmology. So then that's like when you do eye surgery on the eye, and I kind of had that feeling that I wanted to do that before getting into medical school already, and so I was torn about kind of claiming that I wanted to do it, when maybe my mind could change, and so like so then I was like, oh, okay, well, then I kind of know that, like, oh, yeah, even though that's what's pulling me into medicine, like my mind can change. And so I literally wrote that on my personal statement, right? So I said, like I did a lot of things, like taking this class in ophthalmology, shadowing ophthalmologists, and like doing research like on vision, like vision health and like the eye, you know. And I feel like that's what made me realize like A, B, and C on like why I like health and like etc. And then I said, but of course, like, like, and then I think I had like a sentence in my personal statement saying that, whatever medicine like brings me, whether it's like ophthalmology, I don't know if I said ophthalmology actually, but like, whether it takes me like a certain way or another, like, or like I said, whatever profession I do in the future, like, I just know that I like, and then I focus it on like the communities that I want to serve and like what I like overarchingly, like my goal is to be an advocate for like my communities, right? And so um yeah. um so you can like kind of make it open-ended that way, but like, in your heart you're like, I know this is what I want to do, or I think that's what I want to do, but you can make it open-ended, like acknowledge that your mind can change.
Thank you. I think that was a really good question and response because I was also thinking about that.
Mhm.
I think we have time for one last question with 3 minutes left. And
Yeah.
May in the chat said, I'm still a little confused between the personal statement and the disadvantage section in the sense like if you talk about the disadvantage in your personal statement already, do you write it again for the disadvantage section?
um I you well with the maybe with the personal statement you may not have been able to touch upon like the entirety of like your disadvantaged, like of what you want to talk about with the disadvantaged section. So like for me, I think I in my personal statement I briefly talked about like being an immigrant and like um growing up in America and how that was like a little bit of a hard adjustment, but then I wasn't able to talk like a lot about my like fluctuating like my roller coaster, like so like household income, like how much money like my family was making, and so like and like how that impacted me, like working like all throughout college um and like going to food pantries, etc., and like having low cost like housing like in EOP. Like I wasn't able to talk about all of that like in my personal statement, and so then like those like nitty gritty details, like I was able to talk about that and like kind of give like a more background in the disadvantaged section. So yeah, like you can talk about like, oh, I worked multiple jobs. Like I don't know if like that's something maybe you would have said like in the like personal statement, or maybe it is, but then maybe you didn't talk about like your housing situation, then you can talk about that like in the disadvantaged section. Yeah.
Thank
Or
you.
like maybe like you had like you grew up in like like a school district that wasn't like super great, and like teachers were like not really there all the time. Like I feel like that was kind of like my school district when I was growing up, and so like I kind of talked about that too, like on my like personal state or on my disadvantage section. So yeah.
Thank you. That's so true, especially like in districts where science wasn't heavily like budgeted, if that makes sense. So,
Yeah.
but I think we're wrapping up. If anyone has like a last minute question, we have like a minute left. Please feel free to unmute. But if not,
Yeah.
yeah, closing remarks.
Thank
I
you
have a
all.
question.
Yeah,
Sorry.
go for it.
Um,
We'll do that.
I've heard this before. I wasn't sure how like true it is, but for letters of recommendation, is there like a database that letter writers can send to before the application actually opens, or do they actually have to wait? Like if they wanted to write it early, would they have to wait for the application to open in order for them to send it, or can they do it prior to the application opening?
Yeah, so you're actually one of the people in the chat. Like what they did was they used Interfolio. I also used Interfolio. And so like I made like my letter writers turn in all their letters through that. And then I kind of forgot the process now, but like somehow I was able to link that with AMCAS. And like so like the letter writer submitted it there, and then I like linked those two and then it worked. So
Okay.
check out Interfolio. And then if your school has like a letter service, you can also look into that. Berkeley had it, but honestly, I like didn't trust Berkeley. So I was like, I'm gonna use Interfolio, which maybe I don't know if I should have trusted like a private like institution, but I was like, it's more of my friends used it. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna use Interfolio.
Okay, but they can send it there prior to the application opening.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
All right. Yeah. And also for anyone else who's here, like feel free to reach out to, the White Coats email. I guess I'll also drop my email here. If you want to connect and like send me stuff, like if you want to send me your like personal statement, just give me like a few days to read through it and I can like read through it. But yeah. Awesome.
Bye,
Bye
everyone.
everyone.